Hi, welcome to the Fundamentals of Cryptography webinar. I am Nalini Elkins with Industry Network Technology Council, and this webinar is being recorded. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a few words about me. I am the president of Industry Network Technology Council, and I have been working with IPv6, as some of you may know, for many, many years. And I have also been working with network management and diagnostics, and in particular, performance over wideband networks for quite a few years. And for the past 6 or 7 years, I have been working with cryptography as well. So what are we going to learn in this first introductory set of sessions? There's a lot of verbiage in the whole cryptography area. There's components, or sometimes people call them primitives. This isn't exactly primitive as some may define it, but these are the primitive concepts, if you will, that make up a great deal of cryptography. And so that's what we'll be learning in this set of sessions. So let's go ahead and get started. So why are we talking about this to start with? Well, today our communications networks, including the internet, private banking networks, healthcare industry networks, government networks, they all rely on secure communications. And when we're talking about security, we need to understand cryptography, because that's what makes up security. And the success of our networks depends on cryptography. And unfortunately, the success of those people who wish us ill also depends on their ability to break into the cryptography that we develop. So it is a constant struggle, a constant war, if you will. So let's just take a look at some implementation of cryptography, because that's where you're going to start seeing cryptography implemented. So what I'm showing you here is a TLS client hello. You will see cryptography implemented in the security protocols, TLS, MLS, IPsec, and so forth, many of the protocols. And you will see here things such as TLS, AES 128, GCM, SHA-256. Those describe various of the parameters that are needed to make up this particular cipher suite. My hope is by the end of these sessions, you will understand exactly these components. So let's start out. Let's start out slow. Let's start out with how historically we did encryption. So historically, what we did was something called a substitution alphabet. You take the letter A, and then you may say, well, you know, I'm going to either substitute a symbol for it. Some people even did zodiac symbols, but let's keep it simple. Let's say anytime you want to use the letter A, I'm instead going to use the letter H. Anytime I want to use the letter B, I use the number 2, and so forth. For example, let's take this particular substitution alphabet. You can see it described over to the right here. And so let's take a look at this message, the letters T, Q, X, X, A. So we look in the column that has the encrypted alphabet. And so what do we see? We see for a T, we have the real letter H. So T we would call the cipher text, and H would be the plain text. Let's look for Q. So Q is actually the plain text letter E. So then we have, following this particular method, we have the word HELLO. So now you have two of the concepts we need here. We have the cipher text, and then we have the plain text. So the problem with substitution alphabets is they are quite easy to break. Certain letters in a language occur more frequently than others. In fact, this is what they did at a frequency analysis at Cornell. And what they found is that the letter E occurs very, very frequently, and then letter T, A, O, and so forth. And if you have ever played the children's game Hangman, you will know that this is how you play Hangman, is you start guessing which letter the person is using. And this whole, what we're talking about here is called frequency analysis. And that is why substitution alphabets are quite easy to break, is because there's no language that I know of where each part, each character, or each letter of the alphabet occurs as frequently as every other. That would be an interesting language to do, but it does not, to my knowledge, exist. And here's some interesting articles you might be interested in looking at, because in the time of Mary Queen of Scots, they used a substitution alphabet, quite complex substitution alphabets in her letters, and people are deciphering these alphabets. So these kind of things were really used for real people. So let's get a little more sophisticated. And so let's say, for example, we add a key to this. So let's say we have the key zebra. We put that as A, B, C, D, E, and then go ahead and write the letters of the alphabet. And so then we create the encoded message. As I said before, this is again a substitution alphabet. So then we have this encoded message. So what that message comes out to be is flee at once. We are discovered. And of course, that should be something that one generally does not wish to communicate to others. And this is the kind of things that people do. But notice now we have two concepts. We have multiple concepts here. What we have is we have the concept of a key. We have the concept of an algorithm, and the algorithm is basically is very simple. It's an equal algorithm, and then you have the plain text alphabet and the ciphertext, which can be your the formulas, the variables that go in. So using these simple kinds of things, we yet can see some of the underlying concepts that we're talking about. So today we do not use alphabet-based algorithms. We use a key-based algorithm, and clearly the keys are not alphabetic. The keys are numeric, and so we'll work through that in a moment. So in using such encrypted algorithms, you need the encryption key to encrypt it. So you need that message as well as the key. And when it gets to the other side, they need a decryption key. And that, of course, the problem is it has to be the very same key. If you're using Tiger to encrypt, you need Tiger to decrypt. And hence, these kinds of algorithms are called symmetric algorithms. You can see here, here's the encryption key, Tiger encrypting something, and the decryption key, which decrypts it. So let's say, for example, now let's start using numbers, because today, of course, we don't use letters, we use numbers. Let's again take a very simple example. Let's just say we're transmitting only numbers. And so we choose a key 4232. And in this, the algorithm is we're going to repeat that key as many times as necessary. So we just do 4232, 4232, so on. And then our algorithm in this case is addition. And so we say 1 plus 4 is 5, 2 plus 2 is 4, and so on. So our encrypted message or ciphertext is this result here, the 5466, and so on. So when it gets to the other end, we again put the key. Of course, you have to have the very same key. And then we invert that algorithm. Before, what we did was a plus. Now what we'll do is reverse that, which is a minus. And that is, again, another concept that we will come to over and over again, is that of inverting mathematical functions. And it sounds quite difficult, but it actually just means doing it the other way. And so, again, if we do this, we say 5 minus 4 is 1, 4 minus 2 is 2, and then voila, we go and we get our original message back. Notice how in this case, it's absolutely necessary. We've got to have that key. If you did not have the key, you would come up with the wrong result. And so if you're going to hack into this particular system to do some nefarious actions, you need the message, that encrypted message, and you also need the key. Clearly, a 4-byte key is very, very trivial. Today, we have a very long key length. We will talk later in the next session, actually, about some types of encryption, elliptical curve to be specific, which are secure even with smaller keys. But let us stick to this for now. For now, what we're saying is, by and large, the longer the key length, the more secure. Obviously, there's always trade-offs. The longer your key length, it's possible that it will take longer to encrypt and decrypt. There may be some performance problems. There's always trade-offs. So the basic concept, though, is the same. You need a key to encrypt and decrypt the message, and you need some type of algorithm to do it. So symmetric algorithms are, of course, quite elegant, and by and large, they're quite fast and simple to implement. But the big problem here is that both sides have to have the same key. If you have Tiger and I have zebra, well, it is not going to work. And so this is a non-trivial problem. And we will talk about how the solution to this particular problem has been the thing that has really made security as we know it possible. In the old days, when we used to have physical people called couriers, sometimes they were on bicycles, they would actually go physically from one branch to another, carrying the key, probably written on a piece of paper. Some of you younger people may not be aware of the concept of paper and pencil. Only kidding. This is what we used to use in the old days. So let us talk a little bit about the history of symmetric algorithms before we talk about how this problem of getting the same key to each side actually works. And again, this history will shed light on some of the ways that we do things today. And let's start. Okay, so in the old days, by that I mean 1972, NIST began the search for what could be the standard algorithm for symmetric encryption. And again, in those days, IBM ruled the roost, and so they offered an algorithm called the Lucifer algorithm. And this became controversial, as you'll see in the upcoming slides. This algorithm was, quote unquote, adjusted by the NSA and released as a federal standard. This algorithm is called DES, and certainly it is now deprecated, but for many years, DES was used. It is a symmetric block cipher. Again, if we remember, symmetric means two sides are the same, then that will be helpful. So DES is a symmetric key algorithm. It also uses a symmetric block architecture. What that means is that you take 64 bits of plain text at a time, you put it through your algorithm and the key and so on, and you come out with 64 bits of ciphertext. And this is versus stream algorithms, which we'll talk about in a moment. But you see, this is an IPsec negotiation packet. It is an old version of IPsec, but you can see things such as what the encryption algorithm used is, and this happens to be DES, or Data Encryption Standard. And you can also see things like what kind of authentication method, what size of the key, and so on. So these are all the kinds of things that I have been talking about. So a block cipher, which such as DES, uses a key and algorithm to a block of data, 64 bits at a time. The alternative is to do it 1 bit at a time. And clearly, this is much more expensive to do when you have to do it 1 byte or 1 bit at a time rather than to a big block. And hence, block ciphers are generally used. And there will be times too, you can see, for example, in an IPsec, you can see that sometimes there is padding that is used. to cut a long story short on some of this, it's important that if you have messages or encrypted data which is coming out, let's say roughly the same size or padded to the same size, it is much harder for the hacker or somebody who's grabbing your traffic to do traffic analysis on it. For example, if they get a very, very short message, they might think, well, maybe that word or whatever they're sending is log on, something like that. And we wish not to divulge data which can be reversed that way, analyzed that way. And so that's why we sometimes pad data also. So going back to DES, DES uses a 56-bit key. So this is, again, back in the old days, say 1956, IBM came out with their first mainframe computer, and you can see the evolution going on. And we were crawling relative to where we are today, and you can see the processing power was quite low. In fact, a lot of people say that your calculator or your smart watch, certainly your cell phone, is probably more powerful than the machine that put a man on the moon. So we have come a long, long way. So the thing about the size of the key is the size of the key dictates how many keys possibly there are in that. So if you have a 56-bit key, then you have approximately this number of possible combinations, 72, whatever this long number is. And in the old days, it was thought that if you can have a machine that can do a brute force attack, which we will discuss in a moment, to do a brute force attack on DES was not practical. It would be impossible or cost a very, great deal of money to do that. So what is a brute force attack? A brute force attack is simply trying every key in turn. So let's say that we have the key tiger. And so I know it's a 5-character key. So let me try and see if A will work. B, so on, until I, start getting over to Fimer, Tiger, and finally Tiger. And voila, there we are. We get to something. And how big the key is determines the number of keys that are possible, and so then how long it will take to do brute force attacks. And it is quite interesting. You can download things from the internet which will do things like brute force attacks on various keys if you have, quote unquote, forgotten your key for things. So this is quite trivial to code brute force attacks. Anyway, so the problem with DES was the adequacy of its key size. And it was that which led to a great deal of research and, in fact, the need for a replacement algorithm and the whole field which we now call cryptanalysis. And this is a very large field and contains many, many areas today. And in fact, a lot of times I will cavalierly throw in security analysis into this arena also. At the IETF, when new protocols are being developed, there is often a security analysis done of the various components to see if they can be broken. It is a very, very interesting and important area which helps to keep our systems secure. And the growth of that really can be traced back to DES, because it was seen as being suspicious, because there were quote-unquote classified design elements, a short key length, and potential backdoors. Now, I know nothing of whether this is true or not. I do know that these were the suspicions, and this led to the academic scrutiny on how to break it. So in that sense, one can say that that was a good result, because that is a very important thing. We want to develop security protocols which cannot be broken. So let us continue with DES cracking for a couple of slides. It's quite interesting, and again, informative to where we are today. So in 1977, these two guys, who may be familiar to you for other reasons, Diffie and Hellman, they proposed a machine which for the enormous cost of $20 million, and they said we can find a key in a single day. And so fast forward almost 15, 16, 17 years, and we now have a $1 million machine which can do this in a day. But in 1997, RSA Security sponsored a contest, and that contest was won by the Dishal project. And interestingly enough, I believe you can still go onto the internet and see, you can look for the Dishal project, and you can look and you can see some of the early emails inviting people to join. And what they did was they used a grid approach, and that you will see that grid approach being used in later cracking efforts also, because that is another way to get computing power. Many of these kinds of efforts depend on the sophistication of the computing power you have at hand, and as we get into the whole quantum computing arena, it's not just the sophistication and speed of the processor, but potentially the algorithms as well. So that will be where we come to soon. But you will see that in the early days, certainly, it was access to high levels of computing power that led to some of these efforts. In the next year, there was another challenge, and then the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who may be familiar to you, they built a machine called Deep Crack, and you can see it pictured on this side. And what they said is that it cost us $250,000 to build it, and it decrypted the message after only 56 hours of work. And as an aside, at least one attorney from the Justice Department was announcing that DES was unbreakable. Interesting. So $250,000 for a government or certainly many corporations, building a machine like Deep Crack would be no problem. Today, probably a 4-year-old can break DES. I'm somewhat joking, but you can certainly find algorithms which will break it quite rapidly. So what do we do today? We do not use DES today. Today, AES is what is approved as the symmetric key standard, symmetric key algorithm by NIST, but changes are afoot to even this, not the approval, but some of the factors which go into it, and so we'll discuss that later. Okay. So now, so far, we have been discussing symmetric algorithms. Symmetric algorithms are really fairly easy to understand because it's intuitive. You know, we use the key tiger to encrypt, and we need tiger to decrypt. For some of you in the United States, you might remember in our when we were children, there was a cereal called Captain Crunch, and you could get a toy in some of the cereals. It was the secret decoder ring, and that is basically the kind of thing it did. It encrypted your messages. But today, what we use are asymmetric algorithms. So you need one key to encrypt, say flower, and a different key to one key to encrypt and another key to decrypt, and that would be tigers. Now, I will tell you, when I first heard about this, I thought, oh my God, what? I don't understand this at all. And I will tell you, my late mother was a mathematician, and so clearly there has to be a mathematical relationship between these. So I had her work out for me, explain to me what public key algorithms really were. And so what you will see later is some of how she explained it to me. And as I say, she explained it so that even I could understand it. So public key algorithms are generally what is used today. And so then you have two keys. You have the private key, and this key must be known only by whoever has it. Some banks I know, they even break the key up into 4 parts. And so they have 4 different people who know parts of the key, and all 4 have to be there. And then you have the public key. This key can be known to everyone. So this is very interesting. You have one key that everybody knows, but somehow you can't get the other side from it. Now that is very interesting. How in the world can that happen? So that's what we will talk about. So what the relationship is if you encrypt using the public key, that you will be able to decrypt it using the private key, and vice versa. So the way this has to work is that you have to have your private key first, and in order to go from the private key to the public key, it has to be very simple. You don't want to spend 1 year or 17 years or whatever, or even 17 minutes. It needs to be quite simple to generate the public key from the private key. But going the other way, if you know your public key, to go ahead and get that private key, that needs to be very, very difficult indeed. So that's certainly the idea. And the one that we use today very, very often, this is changing. The one that we use very, very often today is called the RSA algorithm, which takes in the first letters of Ron Rivest, Adi Shamir, and Leonard Adleman, RSA. And it is really these people that we have to thank for making security as we know it possible. So this algorithms, these kind of algorithms, these public key, private key algorithms, in particular the RSA, other algorithms rely on other functions, but this one relies on what is called the hard to invert function of factoring prime numbers. We've talked about some of this a little bit before. Remember, a very long time ago, when we started this webcast, we were talking about subtraction being the inversion of addition. And so that is basically an inversion function. And so it turns out factoring prime numbers is a very difficult thing to invert. So let's take a look. So let's take an easy to invert function. So let's take this function. I give you the number 2, you give me the number 2, and I give you 4. Wonder what I'm doing here. You give me 5, and I give you 10. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, you're probably doubling it. And so you give me 9, and then I give you 18. And so now you're like, I know exactly what she's doing. She's doubling. So then if I say, okay, so the end result is 22, what was the original number? You say very easily, it was 11. So that's a very easy to invert function. Clearly, we don't want to use something like that. So let's take another one. Let's take a hard to invert function. You give me the number 2, and I'll give you 1. You give me 5, and I give you 2. So at first you're thinking, well, maybe what you're doing is halving. You divide by 2. And if you say, well, if I give you 5 and I give you 2, maybe you're just giving me the whole part of it, so, and leaving aside the 0.5. All right, that's possible. So now you give me 56 and I give you 35. You go, wait a minute. So now I don't know what this algorithm is at all. Now that's not so easy because it's not merely halving, right? So now if I say 3 is the end result, then you don't know what you can't invert it. You don't know what it is. So the answer really is that I'm using the modulus or remainder function. So what I did was I started with the number 707, and I take the number you gave me, 2, and I give you back the modulus or remainder. And so I gave you back 1. Next thing I start with 707, and you give me 5, get the remainder of 2. So for 3, there are many, many possibilities for what might come up as the original number. So this is a hard to invert function. So that's one thing. Let's now talk about prime numbers. And the reason I'm talking about this particular area is that it's important to understand these small mathematical concepts if we're going to start understanding quantum computing and how it's measured and why. So this is from my mom. So a prime number or prime has only 2 divisors, which is 1 in itself. For example, the smallest ones are 2, 3, 5, 7, and so on. You can't, there's no other number that will divide 3 evenly other than 3 and 1. And the same for 23. If you have the number 4, 4 can be divided by 2. So you notice 4 is not in there. When you do prime number factorization, you give a list of all the prime number factors of a given number. And it's not 1, but it is every copy. of the prime number factor. For example, if you need 8, it's 2 times 2 times 2. 2 is the only factor, but you need 3 copies. It turns out prime number factorization can only be done by brute force. For many, many, many years, there was no formula for doing prime number factorization. We'll talk about this again. So here is an example of RSA. You notice some of the things that I talked about are involved. Don't worry, we're not going to go through the entire thing. you have prime numbers. They're talking about that again. You're talking about the modulus, which is the remainder function. And there's also exponentiation, which we didn't talk about. And you then come up with a formula. So I will say, after understanding some of this, I said, okay, I will give you the benefit here. Now I see how if you run it through that formula, you can create a public key from the private key, which cannot be reversed because it uses a number of hard to invert functions. And in the early days, again, in 1977, there was a challenge that was placed in Scientific American where people were invited to factor this number, C. And this is a very large prime, which has 2 prime number factors. Clearly, to get this number, I just get my 2 prime numbers and I multiply them. And that's very easy for me to do. But to go backwards, well, that was not so easy. And the prize here was to be $100. Clearly, we're doing this for the glory of this. And it was solved 17 years later, again, with the use of a grid. Many, many volunteers working together, and they attacked the number for 8 months before finding the answer. So for many years, it was thought that RSA was secure. And you will see today many, many people, many enterprises use RSA. So one of the things that has come about lately was a one-line change in the TLS 1.3 protocol. And this was in one of the very, very early versions. In fact, I remember sitting in the room, and I believe I may have been there at draft 6 or something like that. And I thought, what? Removing static RSA? I thought, what? Really? Seriously? This is what we're doing? And we can talk about this a great deal at the end, if you would like. We're preparing a presentation at NANOG about the entire implications of this. And of course, as with any, I suppose, advancement, there are good and bad side effects to this. You will see as we come upon it in the next few slides that there are very, very good reasons to remove RSA. As we spoke, RSA depends on prime number factorization and other things, which people thought could be broken only with brute force and taking many, many years or at least months. But now we have 3 things that have led to why even I agree that RSA needs to be redone. We need some transitions, but yes, it needs to be taken out. So let's talk about this. First, we have this, the return of Blindbacker's Oracle threat. It is a vulnerability called, known informally as robot. And it can be used today. If you want to learn more about exactly how this attack works, you can go to this web page here and find out. But robot, suffice it to say, it is a vulnerability that can be used against RSA. But another interesting thing that has happened is the Snowden revelations showed that you don't even need to invent things like quantum computers or even hacks like a robot. You can just steal things. Remember, we're supposed to keep the private key secret. So this is a diagram from a GCHQ slide, which is the secret agency of the United Kingdom. And here's the article, if you wish to read the article about it. And basically the idea is they stole the keys of the SIM card. And there they are. There we are. So now we have a whole number of private keys that we can use. So, but let's say that we're not going to use robot and we're not going to steal anything. Even so, in the next 5 to 10 years, there is a problem with these kinds of algorithms that use a static, a long-lasting key. In fact, it's even more complicated than, and we will discuss that quite a bit more in session 3. Let's start, though. The problem is most people think that there will be a quantum computer that is powerful enough to pose a threat to the current ways we do things, which is, as we've been talking about, things like RSA and even AES, the symmetric algorithms, as we use them today. And at the IETF and other places, there are protocols which are starting to use the post-quantum crypto ciphers. And we will discuss those in session 3 as well. What we're discussing now is the history and where we are today. And you will see, this is a very interesting report that you can read from NIST on what is secure, what is no longer secure, and that for AES, what we need are larger key sizes. So how does this threat really work? So what happens is that today you're going over the internet, let's say, somebody uses Wireshark or another packet capture device. If you're some large government who is capturing, let's say, Department of Defense data, or even Social Security numbers, health insurance company numbers, health information, things like that. Let's say banking information, many things. Let's say today I capture it and I keep it, thinking, well, I've got this traffic now. I can't decrypt it today, but I'm going to wait. Say I wait 10 years and I then say, okay, well, now somebody has developed a powerful quantum computer and I now have access to that. And then, your encryption is broken. And this is why many people are today thinking of migrating, even today, to post-quantum encryption. Let's look a bit more at how this all works. So I will tell you, again, this is one of those things where in the beginning, I know many people at the IETF, when somebody said, you can have a bit, which is 1, 0, which you can have 3 possible positions for a bit. And they were laughed out of the room. But this is exactly what we have. We have a qubit, which is 1, 0, and something which is a mix of 1 and 0. And again, it's very difficult to conceptually understand this, and definitely I cannot say that I do. I take their word for it. So what happened is, a long time ago, 1994, Peter Shor at MIT developed an algorithm to factor large primes. Remember, this is why we spent a fair amount of time on prime numbers, prime number factorization, and how you do all that. So he said, in theory, if I had a quantum computer, I could factor large prime numbers using my algorithm. And soon enough, so Isaac Chang, he developed a quantum computer. It was very, very rudimentary, and he managed to factor the number 15. Now, of course, this is very trivial. The two prime number factors of 15 are 5 and 3. So clearly, you don't need to spend $10 million to factor 15. But obviously, that is not what we're doing. That is as a step one. And you can see here the initial progress to this. How many factors we have, what's the number that's being factored, and how many qubits. So when you start looking at quantum computers, you'll hear them talking about this has this many qubits. And of course, the algorithms were also improved, and there are things such as some, were you given some hints along the way too, or was there some amount of shortening of the space that we were looking at? Some of that will, of course, make things easier to factor. So now, here we are. This is the IBM Quantum Roadmap. And you can see here we are in 2022, 2023, with over 1,000 qubits and moving up rapidly. Google, not to be left behind, is spending many, many millions, or rather billions of dollars. All these numbers are so beyond what I can comprehend. It's hard to know if it's an M or a B. But again, they're spending a great deal of money to develop a quantum computer. I am certain that other people who are not making their effort public are doing the same thing. So, what is the impact on symmetric key algorithms that we've talked about today? We'll need larger key sizes. In the upcoming sessions, we'll talk about some of the other algorithms and what they are and how they can be broken. So remember, the reason behind the key size is the brute force attack. The length of the key and the algorithm and the speed of what it needs to break it. So I will stop. No, you know what? Let me take I'll take questions if you have any at this point. The recording and slides will be made available later after the presentation, so you will get these. If you have any other questions, please let me know, and we can discuss a few things. Or you're certainly welcome to email me as well with your questions. The next session in this series, the part 2, will be on April 20th. What we are doing right now is we are doing one security session and then one IPv6 session. The next session will be introduction to segment routing. So again, if there's, please let me know if there's and I'm not hearing any questions. So I hope you guys found this useful. Please send me an email to let me know. I would appreciate that. And I will stop recording now, and thank you all for coming.